I was talking to an old friend about maybe going on an impromptu ghost hunt this month. And during the conversation, we reminisced about some of the creepy stuff we had experienced over the years. And we remembered a particular event that stuck with us and is one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. The story begins with my friend, who we'll call T, and myself searching a hidden attic like space in his house for a supposed stash of money allegedly left there by a previous tenant. Truth be told, I think that was just a story his mom told us to get us off the Xbox for a while. It was the heyday of Halo, and she was probably just sick of us sitting in front of his TV. But whether or not the story she told us was true, we wound up in this small and low-ceilinged attic space, which could only be accessed by a tiny door hidden in the wooden panels in the wall. We'd known about the door for a while, but had never bothered to go in, mostly because the door seemed like it had been sealed somehow, and we couldn't be bothered with actually using our brains and finding something to pry it open. But the prospect of finding free money in a dusty old room was too much. So we called a few friends to come help search the place, and after a few pries from a putty knife and flathead screwdriver, we cracked the door open and began to explore. At first, it didn't seem like much was in there. Some old clothes and papers scattered about, and a desk in the corner. But through the gloom and dust, we could see something against the far wall, which turned out to be a very old cot of some kind. It was either busted in half or was meant to be folded in half. But either way, it was folded over on itself and we could see something covered in cloth and sandwiched between the two halves. Of course, we wouldn't be good treasure hunters if we didn't look at the covered thing. So we started making our way over to the folded cot. I take a few steps forward and my foot goes right through the floor like it's made of wet paper. Luckily though, T was right behind me and had very quick reflexes. His hand shot out and grabbed the back of my shirt to keep me from falling forward and probably all the way through the floor. We took a second to laugh at the situation and realised we should stick to the sides of the room as the centre was probably the weakest and most likely to collapse under our weight. So we tiptoe all the way around the wall of the room until we get to the cot where we start unfolding it to get at the covered thing. This is where things get strange. As soon as we touched the cot, the room got very cold, which was odd because in an attic in mid-July. At the time, we thought nothing of it. We were certain we'd found the stash and were moments away from being rich. So we unfolded the cot, which took all of our combined strength from how rusted and decrepit the thing was. Honestly, I was surprised it didn't just crumble to dust at the first touch. Finally, we got it unfolded and found that it was, in fact, a decently sized wall mirror that had been wrapped in a sheet or thin blanket. As soon as we uncovered the mirror, the tiny door we had came in slowly swung shut. Again, we didn't think anything about it. It must have been a gust of air or something. We were a little disheartened by the lack of money, but T's mom had sent us in there with her camera to take pictures of anything interesting, so she could see what was in there since she wouldn't be going in herself. So we snap a couple of pictures in the mirror, the cart and the random debris lying around. Now, it is important to note that the mirror's reflective surface was absolutely caked with dust. You could barely tell that it was a mirror, the dust was so thick. Yet the base of the mirror, which looked and felt like it was made of some sort of ceramic, was practically pristine. When I say the base, I mean the part of the mirror in which the reflective surface was set, not the actual bottom of the mirror. I found that to be very odd, as the whole mirror had been covered by the sheet. So why would any of it be dusty at all, let alone just a specific part like that? So we snapped pictures and are just about to call it quits when we hear the dogs barking downstairs, which meant someone was at the door. So we carefully make our way along the walls and out of the room to head downstairs. It turned out to be our friend, whom we'll call B, who'd come to help us search for the supposed stash. After we told her about the attic room, she wanted to see for herself, so naturally we took her up and showed her to the tiny door. Before we even set foot into the room, we told her about the crappy floor and to only walk along the walls. Of course, she either didn't take us seriously, or she just didn't understand what she had said, because she takes a couple of steps forward and almost falls all the way through the floor, practically right through the small hole I'd created earlier. So she's sitting there with her upper body still in the attic, with us and her legs dangling down through the ceiling of the kitchen. It was at this moment that I heard one of the most hilarious sentences I've ever heard. Through the now large hole in the floor, we could hear T's mom on the phone with someone when she said in a very flat, nonchalant tone, "I have to go now. There are children falling through my ceiling." So we get B out of the floor and we have a good laugh about the situation once we were sure she was okay. And we all agreed that it was probably best to just leave the room alone before we cause any more damage. We get out and all the way downstairs when T pipes up that he'd forgotten the camera and flashlight in there when we were getting B out of the hole. So I agreed to go back in with him to grab them. We thought it wouldn't take but a second, as he remembered setting them both down on the floor, close to the hole when we were helping B get out. But when we got in there, we were a little confused. We couldn't see the camera or flashlights anywhere. We looked all over the floor, thinking maybe we'd kicked them around on our way out, or when we were helping B, but they weren't there. We were about to go check if he'd maybe set them outside the door or something, when we were shutting it behind us when T stopped dead in his tracks and whispered my name. I looked over, and I knew in an instant what had made him stop. The mirror was covered up with the sheet again, only this time, the outline of the camera and flashlight could be seen under the cover. We stood there and stared at it for a minute or two before T got brave and started making his way along the wall to get over to the cot. I followed on very shaky legs and watched as he pulled the cover off the mirror to reveal that his camera and flashlight were indeed hidden under the sheet, along with the words, "Help me," scrawled in the dust beside them. It was like something out of a horror movie. The nope factor must have been too much for T, because he snatched up his stuff and made a beeline for the door with me closed behind. We slammed the door shut behind us and never went back in. T's mom thought we were making the whole thing up until we went back and looked through the camera. We had pictures of the cot and mirror both before and after messing with them. One of the folded cots with the covered mirror still hidden. One of the open cots with the covered mirror revealed. And one of the uncovered mirror which showed no writing in the dust. But there was one final picture which convinced his mom that we were telling the truth and that she should never open that door again. The last picture was seemingly taken from atop the cot and clearly showed the giant hole where B had fallen through, which meant that after T had put the camera down so we could get B out of the hole, someone else had picked it up from beside the hole after we'd left, carried it and a flashlight over to the mirror, and snapped the picture after setting the camera down. That had to have happened very quickly, because we were only out of the room for 2 to 3 minutes at the most, as T had realised he'd forgotten his camera almost as soon as we'd gotten downstairs. The only ones there were T, his mom, myself, and B. His dad and older brother were at work, and even if they'd come home, they would have had to pass us on the stairs to get up to that attic. There's just no way I can logically explain the writing on the mirror, and to this day, I still think about what was in the attic with us. Okay, so I don't know where to start. But I'll start with a bit about myself first for some basic info. I believe in God, so I already do believe that paranormal things do genuinely exist, since demons could easily try to fuck with things and people of our world. I will say though, that I'm probably one of the most skeptical people in the world towards the paranormal, besides my belief in God. By the way, not sure what flare I should have used, so I just went with what seemed closest, even though I don't know if it was a man. Okay, so I guess I'll finally start the story. So at this time, it was late at night, about, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 2. I was working out in a warehouse, getting some stuff ready for my work coming up in the next few days. I do this kind of thing on the regular. There were wild animals where I was at, so I was a little bit tense since there were foxes, skunks, cougars, and bears in the area. Anyways, so I got done with my work, and the lights were on in the building still. And then I opened the door to leave. Oh, I should mention, there are 2 trees kind of close to the door of the building. By the way, I also have music playing in my earbuds, and I'm totally chill right now, because I can finally end the night and go to bed. I open the door to leave, and straight in front of me, there are the 2 trees. They're about 70 feet in a straight line in front of the door and slightly to the right. I look straight out after opening the door, and I see what I immediately assumed was a shadow next to the trees. It's similar to my height, because I thought it was just a shadow. My shadow, to be specific. It was literally in a humanoid shape. One of the main reasons it spooked me, though, is because if this was a shadow, why haven't I ever seen it before? I've done this hundreds of times. Why am I just now seeing an eerily dark, super still shadow? So I start getting more nervous as I have these thoughts going through my head. So then I stare at its head and neck in particular, and I tilt my head. It didn't move. It didn't fucking move. I start saying a little prayer, asking God to not have this be my time to go, but also start thinking of any rational explanation of how this is not actually a paranormal thing or being. My thought process. I have had migraines and migraines that mess with my vision before. Maybe it's my vision. Nope, I don't have a headache, and I look to a different section of its body and its image doesn't change with my vision. Maybe I had a weird shape burn into my retina, and for some reason I'm seeing it now of all odd times. Nope, I have vision that is about 50% more sensitive to light. And if it was this bad, if a burn, I'd be at least extremely uncomfortable, or be crying right now because of my eyes being in pain. Maybe the tree is making a weird shadow. No light is shining on the tree to make a shadow appear there. By the way, I've stood here looking at the shadow for about 50 seconds at this point, and have still seen it even after blinking. Anyways, I remember I did more checks to see if it was real or not. I finally thought, fuck, let's just shine a flashlight on it and see if it goes away like a shadow. I shine my focusing flashlight on it, which is focused, so it becomes the brightest it could be. It's still there. It's still goddamn there. It literally looks as if the light is unable to touch it, since it's literally as black and indistinguishable of a figure as it was before. I just now know that it's 100% a humanoid body, and absolutely not a shadow. I reached the conclusion that it's either me being really fucking paranoid and or having a migraine, some kind of paranormal being, or a guy came to rob the place wearing clothes painted with that paint that absorbs light, so he could blend in with the shadows. So I finally do what I think will be a good test. I completely look to my left, body included, shut my eyes for 1 full second, and then look back to see if the shadow has followed my movements. Or it's disappeared, and it was just me being crazy. I look back, and it's still fucking there. At this point, I started getting really freaked out, and started seriously getting nervous and paranoid. I'm staring at it again, and it's in the exact same position. I literally thought to myself, Is this thing going to finally kill me? It honestly seems as if it's almost trolling me, since it literally hasn't moved, and we've just had a staring contest for about 2 minutes at this point. So after staring at it and thinking that, I blinked, and it was gone. Then I really was shitting myself, thinking, oh great, so you either got a robber to try to finally hide himself and run away. I should listen really well to see if I can hear any noise, like any movement outside, if he's running away. Complete silence besides literally crickets. Okay then, so if it's actually a paranormal entity, I've just had a staring contest with it and then joked about it in my head. If it was going to finally make a move and then it did, so did this thing just fucking read my mind? What the fuck? I stood there and thought this and was freaking out for maybe like 7 seconds and then thought, well, if it's paranormal, then this is going to do probably jack shit. But this will make me feel better. So I slammed the door shut and then held my leg against the door so it was held shut as tight as I could. So sat there paranoid and thinking what the fuck for like 20 minutes until I finally decided to leave because I thought to myself, if God wants me dead in 20 seconds, I'll die in 20 seconds, whether I go outside or not. So there's no point in sitting here all night long. So I left, and nothing else happened the rest of the night besides me reflecting on what the fuck happened. And if it was a real paranormal entity, demon, angel, or what the fuck else it could be. Here's my most detailed description of what it looked like. From what I could tell, it was as if you took the darkest shadows that exist and made a body out of it. Nothing reflected off of it. Light didn't look like it touched it. You might be thinking, well, did it look 3D or have a highly defined edge between where its center of its body and body sections defined its edges? And no, it didn't. It's like it had an ever so slight shadow aura around the entirety of its form, where there's a 1/4 of an inch thick deep shadow that makes its form hard to distinguish. Honestly, kind of like real shadows. Before you ask, did it have eyes? It didn't. While researching about what I encountered, some people have noted something similar, but it always had eyes, but mine didn't. So I'm unsure as to how or if those two are connected. If I had to describe it closest to anything, I'd say take an umbral blot from D&D, make it humanoid, then give it a slight shadow aura so it's hard to tell exactly what shape it is. Also, it didn't appear to be wearing clothes, or at least, if it was skin tight since nothing on or of its form depicted any kind of cloth, kind of dangling or adding thickness to its body. This is the most stereotypical shit to say after someone just essentially claimed the impossible happened to them, and that promises over the internet can be seen as pathetic as paper. But I promise I'm not bullshitting about this. I don't know anything about this crap. I've been an atheist for most of my life. Never believed in anything paranormal. A few years ago, in 2014, I moved into a new house. From the get-go, weird things started happening. Unexplainable things. Cabinets in the bathroom opening on their own, pictures falling off of the wall, and the dog just barking at nothing. My kids were complaining that their room was scary. Never heard this complaint from them before, and we've moved several times. There was something unsettling about the entire lower level of this home, where my kids' room was. The split foyer stairs and also the hallway and bathroom on the second floor. This hallway led to my bedroom. The rest of the house was fine. This hallway on the second floor was absolutely frightening, and we were all terrified of it. We kept the door to that hallway shut at all times. I felt crazy in that house. I've moved 13 times in my life. I've never had a problem with any home I've lived in. 2 years go by, And these things just become normal in this house. Then suddenly one day, everything stops. It just went away. No more uneasy things, no more uneasy feelings, no more weird shit happening. We eventually moved later on to get my kids in a better school district. We have been in our new house for 3 years now. Recently, our sunroom has been giving me the same uneasy feeling that our old house gave me. Now the kids are complaining about not wanting to be in or near the sunroom. I haven't mentioned that it has been bothering me also. Can anyone tell me what the hell might be going on? I feel like we're being watched at all the time. I feel insane. I feel like I'm being followed by bad energy from our old house. I know this sounds crazy. Honestly, it would take days to describe the horrors that went on in that house and the impact it wound up having on me emotionally. Let me put a little bit of what happened into perspective for you guys. We purchased this home and had it inspected. It was 10 years old at the time of purchase. It was structurally sound and was built by a reputable builder. My mom worked in construction for 30 years at a bank, and we've made a lot of trusted friends over the years, so I had a lot of professional help in choosing a home. Day one, moving day. The previous owner left some pictures on the wall. We promptly removed them and put our own up. We leave to go get some furniture from the old house and come back to the artwork lying on the stairs in the split level foyer. These were heavy pieces of artwork that were screwed into studs in the wall and hung with heavy duty picture wire. The weight of the artwork would make it impossible for them to fall. We tested this when we hung them to make sure they wouldn't fall. The artwork weighed around 30 to 40 pounds. It weighed down the picture wire to the point where there was no way it could jump up an inch off of the hooks it was attached to. Only an earthquake could have possibly caused that. Day two. Me and my dad are sitting in the living room, taking a break from moving furniture, when we hear a loud noise and glass breaking. It's in the foyer again. A photo has somehow managed to travel from a table by the front door down to the bottom of the stairs. If it was not securely placed on the table, it would have just fallen to the floor. For it to have reached the bottom of the stairs, it would have had to travel 4 feet and then have fallen down the stairs. We were the only 2 people in the house at the time. My dad doesn't get shaken about anything, but he was visibly disturbed by this. 2 weeks, give or take, after the move, my youngest son, who was about 6 at the time, wakes me up in the middle of the night, crying so hard that he threw up on himself and peed on the floor. He said something was making noise in his room. He shares a room with my eldest son, and he didn't hear anything. I've never seen my son scared enough to do that. A few weeks go by, we start regularly hearing weird noises in the attic and promptly call pest control. There's nothing up there and no signs of any critters. Then, the cabinets in the hall bathroom start opening, not closing. You can hear them because they creak. I immediately thought we had rats and called the pest control guy back. Nothing there. The creepy hallway door shuts on its own one day while I'm home alone and scares the shit out of me. I get on the phone with the pest control guy again, who now thinks I'm insane. He finds nothing again. This continues for months. Also, my dog, who never barks, decides to just start randomly barking at things in the corner of my son's room every day. We keep their door closed to keep her from going in there. Then she starts barking at the light in the hallway upstairs. We start closing that door too. She's also incredibly proficient at finding critters. If we had rats, she would have found them, no question. A few months in, downstairs in the kids' room is the stuff of nightmares. You can hear footsteps in and around the stairs outside their bedroom, and you just stay uneasy and sick to your stomach spending time down there. The kids start asking me to stay with them at night down there. I obliged for a few nights, and I experienced this for myself. The kids start sleeping upstairs after this. A year in, we joke about our ghost regularly. I try to make light of the situation for the kids' sake. I think I'm going insane at this point. I've had electricians, pest control, had my dad look for every possible thing that could be the culprit, and even asked a few friends in construction what their thoughts were. Nothing points to an answer. I give up. 2016, no change. Weird sounds and smells, footsteps, nausea, a feeling of impending doom and the feeling of being watched are just part of my day now. Depression takes hold and sends me into a dark, dark place. Somewhere I've never been before that causes me to have thoughts I never thought I'd have. I just want to die now. I feel empty and exhausted, and I'm just done with it all. This goes on for a lengthy amount of time, along with the noises, weird smells, terrified kids, and invisible rats. The kids are still sleeping upstairs most nights. They've just started bringing their toys upstairs and hang out up there. As long as the door to the hallway stays closed, they constantly complain about it. 2017, it's almost spring. It's still a little chilly outside, I remember. I go downstairs because I used my hairdryer and I straighten it together and it caused the breaker to do what it does best, lol. The breaker box is downstairs. I got down there to flip the breaker and then nothing. It was then that I realized that I haven't experienced anything in a couple of weeks at this point, that everything has just stopped. Nothing ever happened again after that. My depression subsided and I get back to my normal self, like it never even happened. We moved in 2019 with no issues. Here's a weird fact though. I found out later on from my old neighbours that the previous couple that lived there had died in the house. What was particularly disturbing was that the lady that lived there broke her neck on the stairs in the foyer and died. That would have been good to know while we were living there. We knew when we purchased the house that there was an old couple that lived there, and they knew that they had passed away in the home. We just assumed it was from old age. My wife struggled really bad with major depression. We got married in November of 2018. We both drank way too much and were dependent on benzos and opiates, as well as whatever else might be around. My wife got weight loss surgery a few months before our wedding, and she just seemed to be slipping into an even darker headspace after that. In October of last year, she took her own life. I discovered her body in our tiny house we have parked on my parents' property. So horrible. I made it a few months before I overdosed on fentanyl and ended up in the hospital with a very small chance of living. I pulled through and moved away for 7 months and got clean from everything. It was the only way I would have ever gotten clean. I like to think she had a hand in helping me pull through to be able to live a better life. Now that I've been back home, I've never gone over to that tiny house. Only a handful of times. It doesn't scare me when I'm in there. It's just an odd feeling in a way. Last week, I noticed the bathroom light was on, so I went in to turn it off. Both switches were off, yet the light was on. Weird. I toggled them back and forth and they went off. That brings me to today. I noticed the curtains in the loft where she had shot herself in were pulled open. Nobody had gone up there in a long time. I went up and closed them. I'm not a huge believer in the paranormal, but I've never been one to dismiss it either. What do you think is going on over there? I've since gotten my life together, got counselling and have been drug-free since January. Life has been really hard since I lost her. Should I leave the blinds open for her to enjoy the view? My childhood home was built by my own grand something father and has stayed in our family since forever. My mother claims that her paternal side of the family were always rather sensitive to paranormal stuff, despite trying hard to hide this. While the entire house was iffy and plain uncomfortable to live in, there was a certain room that no one could bear to stay in. It used to be my grandparents, but they couldn't handle it and decided that my aunt would sleep there. My aunt wasn't able to either and ended up sleeping anywhere but her own bedroom. When my own parents took over, I was about 4 years old. And of course, they gave me the bedroom. Not that I knew any of this until years later. Both my parents went to great lengths in order to convince me and my brother that paranormal stuff was just made up in order to scare kids. Doesn't change the fact that I went from sleeping through the night since I was 3 months old to barely being able to sleep at all. I would complain about seeing someone scary and dangerous in my room. I still remember the pure terror I felt every single night going to bed. I couldn't sleep unless I was hidden under the comforter while facing the wall, with the CD drowning out the noise with folk tales and Christmas carols playing in the background. After a while, my little brother started sleeping in the same room due to his being repainted. I lasted for a couple of days before my mother decided that the two of us should sleep in her room while she slept in mine. My father was away for weeks at a time due to work. She told me later on that she decided to do that because my brother woke up screaming. I'm a really heavy sleeper and didn't notice. And the next day, she saw bruises and what looked like scratches on his back and around his neck. She slept there that one night, but ended up joining us in her room after. She apparently woke up unable to breathe during the night, and when she looked up, she saw someone on top of her before she was being choked by them. She really thought she was going to die, but managed to throw the thing off before running out of the room. After that night, nobody ever slept in my bedroom again. Me and my brother were clueless, despite us both being terrified of what resided inside my room. Our mom simply pretended that it was nice for me and my brother to share the big bed, while she took over my brother's room. This greatly helped my sleep and general feeling of terror, despite still feeling scared every night in that house. I never felt scared anywhere else. Neighbors and friends would also tell us that they saw someone in the window of my bedroom, despite none of us being there. None of us were even tall enough to look out of the window. My dad eventually bought me porcelain dolls, so they could tell the people who asked that it was probably the dolls set up on the windowsill. I never knew any of this until later on, but it got to the point that people actually started avoiding walking past our house alone because they thought it was haunted. Me and my brother, and even random kids from primary school, would talk about, mention, and interact with people in my home who weren't there. My mom always played it off, but you can't really do much when a random kid is asking you about the old man sitting in the chair, or when your son asks about the lady who was petting his feet in the morning. Eventually, the house burned down, the second house fire we survived. We rebuilt, and my mom had the place exorcised at least 10 times by all sorts of different people. From priests to people who claimed to be clear-sighted or able to talk to angels, and practitioners of the occult. This was done in secret, of course. When we moved back in, it was better. For a while. Personally, I repressed all memories and ideas regarding anything paranormal or scary. I convinced myself I was just afraid of the dark as a kid. I lived a couple of years in ignorant bliss. But then it started again. Little things at first. Hearing someone coming through the front door just to walk up the stairs and look around before leaving again when I was home alone. I thought it was a family member ignoring my greeting and was mightily insulted until I found out at dinner that no one had been there. Then I started having trouble sleeping again, but only in my own bedroom. I never had nightmares, but I had trouble calming down enough to fall asleep. I had a big clump in my chest, feeling like something terrible would happen at any minute. My current bedroom is roughly in the same place as the previous one. My toddler brother started talking to people. He had a name for one of them that he would always laugh and smile at. But there was also one which terrified him and would make him start shaking while staring transfixed and cry about mean and scary. I felt my soul leave my body the first time I held him during this. His eyes would follow movements I couldn't see. Then my cousin came to sleep over with my aunt. Only problem was that he couldn't fall asleep because of those scary people chanting my initials over and over, and the man who would walk in to stare at him from time to time when he was in bed. Not my bedroom this time. Eventually, I started feeling like someone was walking into my room every night. But I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid due to my recent trouble falling asleep. Sometimes I would hear my youngest brother, at this point a young child, knock on the walls. I often humoured him and knocked back. This continued for several weeks until I asked my mom, who slept in the same room as him, why he was awake and knocking on the walls when he should be sleeping. She said that he'd only done that once when she was trying to put him to sleep, but that she'd put a stop to it. My brother confirmed it later when I asked him about it. I spent weeks knocking different tunes and repetitions back and forth with someone through the walls, but nobody else even heard it. I immediately quit it, and the wall I'd often seen as a safe space became another thing that frightened me. It didn't take too long after that before I regularly felt someone's breath on my face after having closed my eyes when trying and failing to fall asleep. I couldn't handle this and started staying awake at night to avoid it. I eventually moved out and all the problems disappeared. I didn't lay paranoid in bed, waiting for shit to happen. I didn't feel scared, and I fell asleep easily and peacefully. I still got my room back at my parents' place, and I've recently moved back. I thought I was over whatever the fuck was going on. But the more time I spend in my bedroom here, the more I start feeling like I used to. I can feel the staring and the breathing whenever I spend too long falling asleep at night. The heavy feeling in my chest is back, and I don't feel fully rested when I wake up, despite sleeping heavily with only good dreams. I don't want to believe in paranormal shit, because I find it terrifying, but I can't explain a lot of the shit from my childhood any other way. I honestly feel kinda crazy just thinking about all this stuff, but there are so many other people who have experienced shit around my family home that I just can't ignore it, even though I'd like to. Fun fact, the Rebeat's house was hit by lightning that caused a minor earthquake, which woke up the entire neighborhood. The house was glowing green, according to eyewitnesses.